The silence of Pine Valley Estates shattered at dawn when Dorothy Miller's scream pierced the morning air. Through her kitchen window, she'd spotted something that defied belief. Max, the Sullivan family's German shepherd, leaping their backyard fence with something dangling from his mouth. Not someone, a tiny whimpering puppy. "He's stealing their baby," Dorothy shouted into her phone, alerting the neighborhood watch. Within minutes, Thomas Sullivan found himself surrounded on his front lawn by neighbors in bathrobes and slippers, their faces twisted with accusation, their fingers pointed toward his beloved rescue dog, now huddled protectively in the corner of their garage. "That dog's dangerous," Bob Whitaker snarled, his face flushed with rage. "First our Emma goes missing, now this. That beast needs to be put down." What none of them understood not yet was that Max wasn't the villain of this story. The real monster wore human skin and a friendly smile. Behind the garage door, 5 tiny German shepherd puppies nestled against Max's warm body, their lives saved by an act the humans had misinterpreted as theft. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Pine Valley Estates sprawled across the northeastern edge of Phoenix, Arizona, where cookie-cutter homes with terracotta roofs baked under the merciless summer sun. The weatherman had declared it the hottest June on record, with temperatures climbing past 110 degrees for 12 consecutive days. The neighborhood association had long ago mandated desert landscaping to conserve water, replacing lush lawns with decorative rock gardens and drought-resistant cacti. It was in this parched setting that the Sullivan and Whitaker families lived, sharing a property line but little else in common. Thomas Sullivan, a high school history teacher with salt and pepper hair and permanent smile lines, had moved his family here 3 years ago seeking affordable suburban peace. His wife, Sarah, a pediatric nurse with gentle hands and a steely resolve, worked night shifts at Banner Desert Medical Center. Their 14-year-old daughter, Emma, possessed her father's thoughtfulness and her mother's compassion, qualities that extended abundantly to animals. 2 years ago, after much pleading from Emma, the Sullivans had adopted Max from Desert Paws Rescue. Max wasn't just any German shepherd. At 6 years old, his muzzle had just begun to frost with silver, and a jagged scar ran across his left flank, remnants of his previous life as Officer James Cooper's K-9 partner. When Cooper died in a convenience store shooting, Max had suffered both physical and emotional wounds. The shelter warned the Sullivans that Max might never fully adjust to civilian life, but Emma had insisted. "He just needs someone to believe in him again." Next door, the Whitaker family presented a glossier facade. Robert "Bob" Whitaker had made his fortune flipping distressed properties during the housing crash. His wife Jennifer maintained a popular social media account, showcasing their authentic luxury lifestyle, though her followers never saw what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Their son Tyler, a high school baseball star with collegiate aspirations, inherited his parents' charm and their casual disregard for anything that didn't advance his ambitions. The Whitakers' German shepherd Luna had been Jennifer's impulsive purchase after seeing a celebrity pose with the same breed in a magazine. At 2 years old, Luna's gleaming coat and aristocratic bearing made her the perfect prop for Jennifer's poolside photo shoots, until Luna's unexpected pregnancy ruined her camera-ready figure. Between these two households lived Eleanor Richardson, a 72-year-old widow whose wire-rimmed glasses and sensible shoes belied her sharp mind and sharper tongue. What her neighbors didn't know was that Eleanor had spent 30 years training military dogs before retiring to watch the world from her porch swing. missing nothing. The trouble began on a Tuesday when Luna's labor started unexpectedly beside the Whitakers' pool. Jennifer had been hosting her monthly mimosas and mindfulness gathering for her social media followers when Luna's whimpering interrupted her live stream. The camera captured Jennifer's momentary flash of annoyance before she recovered with practiced concern. "Looks like our sweet Luna is bringing new life into the world," she cooed to her phone, quickly positioning herself for a flattering angle with the laboring dog in the background. "Nature is so beautiful, isn't it? Had blessed #dog mama." Once the cameras stopped rolling and her guests departed, Jennifer's facade crumbled. "Bob," she shouted toward the house, "the dog's making a mess on the travertine. Do something." Bob Whitaker emerged from his home office, irritation etched across his tanned face. "Just leave her. Dogs have been having puppies without human help for thousands of years." He glanced at his Rolex. "I've got a conference call in 10 minutes with investors. Can't you handle this? I'm not touching that situation," Jennifer replied, wrinkling her nose. "Call the gardener or something?" By dusk, Luna had delivered 6 puppies without human assistance. Exhausted and dehydrated in the 108-degree heat, she lay panting on the concrete, her maternal instincts battling her physical depletion. From his side of the fence, Max watched with growing agitation, pacing back and forth along the property line, his ears pricked forward at each tiny yelp. "What's got into you, boy?" Thomas Sullivan asked, following Max's gaze. Through the slats in the fence, he glimpsed Luna surrounded by squirming bundles. "Well, would you look at that, Luna's had her puppies." He called over his shoulder, "Emma, come see." Emma rushed to the fence, her eyes widening with delight. "Oh my gosh, puppies, they're so tiny." Her smile faltered as she observed Luna's distress. "Dad, Luna doesn't look good. Should we call the Whitakers?" Thomas frowned, noting Luna's heaving sides and the puppy's increasingly frantic movements. "I'll text Bob. Maybe they haven't noticed." "How could they not notice?" Emma asked incredulously. 3 houses away, Eleanor Richardson stood at her kitchen window, binoculars trained on the Whitakers' backyard. As a former military dog trainer, she recognized a dog in distress when she saw one. Luna's labored breathing and the scattered positioning of the puppies too far from their mother's warmth triggered alarms in Eleanor's experienced mind. When she spotted Jennifer stepping over the puppies to position a pitcher of iced tea for a photograph, Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Fools," she muttered, reaching for her phone. By nightfall, Luna's situation had deteriorated. The Whitakers had moved her and the puppies to a plastic kiddie pool in the corner of their yard with a bowl of water and some kibble. But Luna, inexperienced and overwhelmed, struggled to keep her puppies organized. She'd nudge one back only to have another crawl away. Her distress grew with each passing hour. Max hadn't settled all evening. He refused dinner and ignored Emma's attempts to coax him inside, maintaining his vigilant position along the fence. At one point, he began to dig, his powerful paws sending dirt flying until Thomas firmly called him away. "I don't like this," Sarah Sullivan said, joining her husband by the fence after returning from her hospital shift. "Those puppies need proper care. Luna's a first-time mother in dangerous heat." "Bob says they've called their vet," Thomas replied, though his tone suggested doubt. "Said they'll take them in tomorrow for a checkup." Sarah's medical training made her skeptical. Those puppies won't make it through the night if they're not kept warm and hydrated. Newborns can't regulate their body temperature." As if understanding her words, Max whined, pressing his nose against the fence. At 2 a.m., the Sullivan household slept all except Max. His acute hearing picked up the increasingly feeble cries from next door. Luna had fallen into an exhausted sleep, unable to respond to her puppy's needs. One had already grown still. The others were scattered around the pool, their tiny bodies cooling in the desert night air that, while mild to humans, was dangerously cold for newborns. Max made his decision. With calculated precision, he pushed against the loose board in the fence that Thomas had been meaning to fix. It gave way just enough for him to squeeze through, silent as a shadow. He approached the kiddie pool. Luna lifted her head weakly, recognizing Max from their fence line encounters. Instead of the territorial aggression one might expect, she whimpered softly, a mother's plea for help. With gentle jaws, Max picked up the weakest living puppy, the one furthest from Luna's warmth, carrying it with the same delicate precision he'd once used to extract survivors from earthquake rubble. He returned to the fence, navigated the gap, and carried his precious cargo to the shelter of the Sullivans' garage, where an old dog bed awaited. One by one, through the dark hours before dawn, Max rescued 4 more puppies, leaving only the strongest one curled against Luna's side. By the time Dorothy Miller spotted him making his final journey at sunrise, Max had nearly completed his mission of mercy. A mission the humans, in their limited understanding, would call theft. "You need to control that animal, Sullivan," Bob Whitaker thundered, his finger jabbing the air toward Thomas's chest. A crowd had gathered on the Sullivans' front lawn, drawn by Dorothy Miller's hysterical calls about a dog napping in progress. "That beast has stolen 5 of our purebred puppies. Do you have any idea what they're worth?" Thomas stood his ground, though his face had paled. "Max wouldn't hurt those puppies. Bob, there must be some explanation." "The explanation is that your rescue mutt is dangerous," Bob snapped, his voice carrying for the benefit of the onlookers. "First, he digs under our fence, and now he's stealing our property. Those are registered German shepherds with championship bloodlines." Sarah Sullivan stepped forward, her nurse's scrubs still on from her night shift. "Bob, we're as confused as you are. But Max is gentle. He's never shown aggression toward any animal." "Tell that to Luna," Jennifer Whitaker interjected, her phone already recording the confrontation. "She's beside herself, a mother separated from her babies." Emma Sullivan, hovering at the edge of the confrontation, finally broke her silence. "That's not true. I saw Luna yesterday. You left her outside all day in the heat with the puppies scattered everywhere. She wasn't taking care of them." "Emma," Thomas cautioned, "but the damage was done." Bob's face darkened. "Are you accusing us of neglect, young lady, because that's a serious allegation?" "Where are the puppies now?" Officer Martinez asked, having arrived in response to Bob's 911 call. His weathered face remained professionally neutral, though his eyes narrowed slightly at the escalating tensions. "In our garage," Sarah admitted. "But, officer, you need to see their condition. They're severely dehydrated." As the group moved toward the Sullivans' garage, none of them noticed Eleanor Richardson watching from her driveway, her ancient flip phone discreetly recording every word. Inside the garage, Max lay curled protectively around 5 tiny puppies, his body creating a warm shelter. When the door opened, He raised his head but made no move to flee or show aggression instead. His eyes seemed to plead for understanding. Officer Martinez knelt beside the makeshift nest, his experienced gaze assessing the situation. "These pups are in rough shape," he noted, gently examining the smallest one. "They need veterinary attention immediately." "They were fine until your dog took them," Jennifer insisted, though she kept her distance from the puppies, more concerned with capturing the scene on her phone. "That's not what it looks like to me," the officer replied, his tone measured. "I've seen neglected animals before, Mrs. Whitaker. These pups show signs of dehydration and possible hypothermia that didn't happen in the last hour." As if on cue, Max rose slowly, picked up one puppy gently in his mouth, and carried it to Sarah's feet, then looked up at her with intelligent eyes. "He's bringing them to you for help," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. The moment shifted the energy in the room. Even some of the neighbors who had been firmly on the Whitakers' side exchanged troubled glances. "I want those puppies returned to our property immediately," Bob demanded, though with less conviction. "And I want an examination of all the animals first," Officer Martinez countered. "Animal welfare comes before property disputes. Mr. Whitaker?" As the confrontation continued, Max retreated to a corner of the garage, seemingly defeated by the human's inability to understand. It was then that Thomas noticed something clutched in his daughter's hand. "Emma, what's that?" Emma opened her palm to reveal a small worn leather item, a police badge. It was tangled in Max's collar. "I found it this morning when I was checking on him and the puppies." Thomas took the badge, turning it over to read the inscription, K9 Unit, Officer James Cooper. "James Cooper," Sarah repeated, her brow furrowing. "Why does that name sound familiar?" "Because every K9 officer in Phoenix knows it," came a new voice. Eleanor Richardson stood in the garage doorway, her slight frame commanding unexpected attention. Officer Cooper and his partner Max were the most decorated search and rescue team in the department's history. They pulled 17 people from collapsed buildings after the Grand Avenue gas explosion 5 years ago. The group fell silent, all eyes turning to the elderly woman. "How do you know that, Mrs. Richardson?" Officer Martinez asked. "Because I trained them," Eleanor replied simply. "Before I retired, I spent 30 years with the military and police K9 programs. Max isn't just any dog. He was specifically trained to locate and extract victims in distress. What you're seeing isn't theft. It's a rescue operation." For the first time, doubt flickered across Bob Whitaker's face. "That's convenient," he scoffed. But his bluster had diminished. Eleanor approached Max, who immediately stood at attention, his training evident in his posture. "This dog," she said, running her gnarled hand along his scarred flank, "lost everything when Cooper was killed in the line of duty. His handler, his purpose, his home, and yet his instincts remain intact." She turned to face the group, her voice strengthening. "Last night, I watched from my window as Luna struggled with her puppies. I saw Jennifer step over them to take pictures for her Instagram. I saw Bob ignore his wife when she called for help. And I saw these puppies scattered and crying while their mother grew too weak to care for them." "You spying on us, old woman," Bob growled. "I observe," Eleanor corrected him, and what I observed was a trained rescue dog doing exactly what he was taught to do, save lives at risk. The revelation hung in the air, reshaping everyone's understanding of the situation. Officer Martinez studied Max with new respect, then turned to the Whitakers. "I think we need to check on Luna and the remaining puppy," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And then we're all going to have a conversation about animal welfare laws in Maricopa County." As the group filed out toward the Whitaker residence, Emma hung back, kneeling beside Max. "You were a hero all along," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. "And nobody knew." Max's amber eyes met hers with an intelligence that transcended species, the look of a soul who had seen both the worst and best of humanity and still chosen to serve. The procession to the Whitakers' backyard revealed a scene far worse than anyone had anticipated. Luna lay listlessly in the plastic kiddie pool, her once glossy coat now dull and matted. The single remaining puppy squirmed weakly against her side, its cries barely audible. The water bowl nearby was empty, tipped over and baked dry by the morning sun. "Jesus Christ," Officer Martinez muttered, immediately dropping to one knee beside the struggling animals. "This dog needs immediate medical attention." Jennifer Whitaker hung back, her manicured hand covering her mouth in what appeared to be shock, though her phone remained positioned to capture the dramatic scene. "We had no idea," she stammered. "Luna seemed fine yesterday." "Fine?" Sarah Sullivan's medical training overrode her natural diplomacy. "This dog is severely dehydrated and likely suffering from heat exhaustion. Her milk production has probably stopped entirely." She reached for the remaining puppy, checking its gums. "This little one is critical too." The neighbors who had followed, initially ready to condemn Max, now shifted uncomfortably, witnessing the neglect firsthand. Dorothy Miller, who had raised the first alarm about Max, looked particularly stricken. "I don't understand," she murmured to Eleanor. "The Whitakers always seem to take such good care of their pets. Their yard is immaculate, and Luna always looks so beautiful in Jennifer's photos." Eleanor's weathered face remained impassive. "Appearances can be misleading, Dorothy. I've been watching Luna's condition deteriorate ever since the Whitakers got her. Beautiful coat. Yes, but a dog isn't a lawn ornament. She's been left outside in this heat more often than not." Officer Martinez had already radioed for animal control support. Rising to his feet, he fixed Bob Whitaker with a hard stare. "Mr.
Whitaker, when was the last time Luna received water or food?" Bob tugged at his collar, sweat beading on his forehead that had nothing to do with the morning heat. "Jennifer handles the dogs. I've been tied up with a major development deal." "I refreshed her water yesterday afternoon," Jennifer insisted. "And I gave her extra food because, she's nursing."
"That's not what I saw," Eleanor interjected quietly. "I watched from my kitchen window. You took photos of Luna and the puppies for at least 30 minutes, then went inside when your phone rang. You never came back out." Jennifer's carefully composed expression faltered. "Are you spying on me? That's harassment." "No, that's neighborhood watch," Eleanor replied evenly. "Been doing it for 30 years, got a log book and everything." She patted her pocket meaningfully. Thomas Sullivan, who had been examining the backyard with increasing concern, called out from near the garden shed, "Officer, you might want to see this." Martinez followed him to a stack of wire crates partially hidden behind the shed. Brand new, still with price tags attached.
6 crates, Thomas noted. 1 for each puppy. Bob stepped forward quickly. Those are for transporting them to the vet, he explained, though his eyes darted nervously. Responsible breeding practices. Martinez didn't look convinced. When exactly were you planning to take these puppies to the vet, Mr. Whitaker? They're barely 24 hours old, and from what I can see, no preparations have been made for proper newborn care. While the adults continued their tense exchange, Emma had slipped back to the Sullivan house. Returning with a small cooler, kneeling beside Luna, she carefully offered a syringe of water to the weakened mother dog, using the technique she'd learned volunteering at Desert Paws Rescue. "Easy, girl," she murmured. "Small sips." Luna's eyes, dull with exhaustion, fixed on Emma with desperate trust. She accepted the water, then weakly licked the girl's hand. "She's burning up," Emma called out, her voice cracking with emotion. "We need to cool her down." Sarah was already in motion, veterinary emergency training from her nursing rotations taking over. "We need wet towels, a fan, and more water, not ice cold, but cool. We have to bring her temperature down gradually." Within minutes, the Sullivans' yard had transformed into an impromptu veterinary triage center. Neighbors who had arrived as accusers now shuttled supplies. Beverly Wilson from across the street brought clean towels. Mike Jefferson, a retired paramedic, helped Sarah assess Luna's vital signs. Even Dorothy Miller filled her gardening watering can to gently sprinkle cool water over Luna's overheated body. Through it all, the Whitakers stood apart. Bob checking his watch repeatedly while Jennifer's social media performance had abruptly ceased, her phone now clutched tightly against her chest. "The animal ambulance is en route," Officer Martinez announced, returning from his patrol car. "They'll transport Luna and the remaining puppy to Emergency Animal Hospital on Camelback." "What about our other puppies?" Bob demanded, gesturing toward the Sullivan home. "We want them returned immediately." Martinez's expression hardened. "Those puppies are evidence in a potential animal neglect case, Mr. Whitaker. For now, they stay with the Sullivans, who seem to be the only ones providing appropriate care." "This is ridiculous," Bob spluttered. "Those are purebred German shepherds worth thousands each. You can't just—" "Actually, I can." Martinez cut him off. "Arizona Revised Statute 132910 covers animal cruelty, including neglect. And right now, I'm seeing probable cause." As if sensing the rising tension, Max appeared at the opening in the fence, his intelligent eyes fixed on Luna. To everyone's surprise, Luna's tail gave a feeble wag of recognition. "Would you look at that?" Eleanor murmured. "She knows who saved her babies." The animal ambulance arrived with a quiet efficiency that contrasted sharply with the neighborhood drama. 2 veterinary technicians quickly assessed Luna and the puppy, exchanging concerned glances that the medically trained Sarah immediately recognized. "It's touch and go, isn't it?" she asked quietly. The lead technician nodded grimly. "The puppies severely dehydrated and the mother's showing signs of mastitis. We'll do everything we can." As they carefully loaded Luna and her remaining puppy into the ambulance, Emma approached, tears streaming down her face. "Can we bring the other puppies? They need their mom." The technician hesitated. "Normally, yes, but in this case, the mother's milk has probably dried up from dehydration. The puppies would be better off bottle-fed for now."
We can do that, Emma said immediately. I've bottle-fed orphaned puppies at the rescue.
Sarah nodded in agreement. We'll take full responsibility for them. Now wait just a minute, Bob interrupted. Those are our puppies. If they need special care, we'll hire someone. Martinez stepped between them. Mr. Whitaker, I've already explained the situation. The puppies remain in protective custody until this matter is resolved. As the ambulance departed, Eleanor Richardson approached Officer Martinez, her voice pitched for his ears alone. You might want to look into Bob Whitaker's phone records, particularly his texts from the last week. I have reason to believe those crates weren't intended for veterinary visits. Martinez's eyebrows rose. Care to elaborate, ma'am? Eleanor's weathered face hardened. 2 days ago, I was walking past his car when he was on the phone. Window down. AC running, typical Bob. Wasting energy. I heard him clearly. 6 purebred German Shepherd puppies. Ready for pickup next week. 5,000 cash. No papers. No questions. Didn't sound like a conversation with a veterinarian to me. Martinez's expression darkened. That would explain a lot. He made a note in his pad. I'll need a formal statement from you, Mrs. Richardson. You'll get it, she assured him, along with my logbook documenting Luna's condition for the past 3 months. Back at the Sullivan home, Emma had organized the garage into a makeshift puppy nursery. Thomas brought down the space heater from the attic to maintain a steady temperature, while Sarah prepared formula using the emergency puppy kit Emma had assembled months ago for her rescue volunteer work. Every 2 hours, Sarah instructed her husband and daughter. They'll need feeding round the clock for at least the next 2 weeks. We'll make a schedule, Thomas agreed, already clearing his calendar mentally. Summer vacation had its advantages for a teacher. Max hadn't left the puppy's side since their return from the confrontation. He lay curled around them, his body providing warmth and comfort, his tongue occasionally bathing them as a mother would. When Emma approached with the first bottle, he watched attentively, seeming to understand the process. "You're amazing, Max," Emma whispered, stroking his scarred muzzle. "You knew exactly what they needed." Over the next 3 days, the Sullivan family operated in shifts, catching sleep when they could between puppy feedings. Max remained vigilant, alerting them with a gentle whine whenever a puppy seemed distressed. His previous training became increasingly evident as he anticipated problems before they occurred, moving a puppy that had rolled onto its stomach back to its side to prevent aspiration, stimulating them after feedings to encourage elimination, and maintaining constant body contact to regulate their temperature. "It's remarkable," Dr. Patel observed during her house call to check the puppy's progress. "He's essentially acting as their surrogate mother, demonstrating behaviors he would have been trained to recognize during search and rescue operations." "Is that common?" Thomas asked, watching Max gently nudge a wandering puppy back into the nest. "Not at all," Dr. Patel replied. "Most male dogs, even fathers, don't exhibit this level of nurturing behavior. Max is exceptional." She hesitated, then added, "I've just come from examining Luna at the emergency hospital. She's stabilized, but her recovery will be slow. The mastitis is severe, and she's extremely malnourished, even if she recovers fully. She may never be able to nurse these puppies." The implications hung in the air. Sarah voiced what they were all thinking. The Whitakers will still try to reclaim them. Legally, they're still the Whitakers' property,
Dr. Patel acknowledged. But given the circumstances, Animal Control has authority to keep them in protective custody until the investigation concludes. She smiled faintly. And from what I hear, Officer Martinez is being extremely thorough with his investigation. The news spread quickly through Pine Valley Estates. By the fourth day, the story had transformed from Sullivan's dangerous dog steals puppies to Hero Police dog rescues neglected puppies. Neighbors who had initially condemned Max now stopped by with supplies for the puppies and treats for their savior. Even Dorothy Miller made a tearful apology, bringing a handmade dog bed she'd stayed up all night sewing. "I jumped to conclusions," she admitted to Thomas. "Seeing a big dog carrying a puppy, I just assumed the worst. Max's appearance can be intimidating," Thomas acknowledged, accepting her gift. "But he's always been gentle." "Eleanor's been telling us about his background," Dorothy said. "Is it true he pulled a child from a burning building?" Thomas smiled. "According to his service record, yes, 3 children, actually. 3 children. He and Officer Cooper received a commendation from the mayor. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a black SUV with tinted windows. Bob Whitaker emerged, looking significantly less confident than he had days earlier. His designer polo shirt was rumpled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Sullivan," he called, approaching the front door. "We need to talk." Thomas stepped onto the porch, deliberately closing the door behind him. "What can I do for you?" "Bob." Whitaker glanced at Dorothy, who made no move to leave. "Privately," he insisted. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my neighbors." Thomas replied evenly. "We don't have secrets in this household." Bob's jaw tightened. "Fine. I want to make a deal about the puppies." "There's no deal to make," Thomas said. "They're in protective custody pending the investigation." "Look, things got out of hand," Bob said, lowering his voice. "Jennifer's not really a dog person, and I've been swamped with work. We made some mistakes with Luna. I admit that. But those puppies are valuable purebreds. I'm willing to compensate you for your care, say $500, and we'll forget the whole fence damage issue." "Fence damage," Thomas repeated incredulously. "Bob, this isn't about money or fences. It's about animal welfare." $10,000, Bob said abruptly. "Cash. Today. For all 5 puppies." The offer hung in the air, its desperation palpable. "Why is this so important to you, Bob?" Thomas asked quietly. "A few days ago, you couldn't be bothered to provide basic care for these animals. Now you're offering thousands. What changed?" Before Bob could answer, a police cruiser pulled up behind his SUV. Officer Martinez stepped out, accompanied by another officer in plain clothes. "Robert Whitaker," the plainclothes officer called. "Detective Wilson, Phoenix PD. We'd like to ask you some questions about your communications with Michael Ferraro." The blood drained from Bob's face. Without another word to Thomas, he turned and strode rapidly toward the officers, already reaching for his cell phone. "Who's Michael Ferraro?" Dorothy whispered to Thomas. "I have no idea," Thomas replied, watching the tense conversation unfold at the curb. From inside the house, Max's distinctive bark sounded not his alarm bark, but the 3 sharp sounds that the Sullivans had come to recognize as his alert that a puppy needed attention. "Duty calls," Thomas said,
excusing himself and leaving the unfolding drama on his front lawn. As he rejoined his family in the garage-turned-nursery, he found Emma giggling as the smallest puppy attempted to stand on wobbly legs, repeatedly tumbling into Max's patient form. "Dad, look, Peanut is trying to walk." Thomas felt a wave of affection wash over him. Watching his daughter and their extraordinary dog care for these vulnerable creatures. Whatever legal battles lay ahead, whatever the Whitakers' mysterious agenda might be, this moment of pure compassion was worth protecting. Max looked up at Thomas, his intelligent eyes seeming to convey both pride in his charges and determination to defend them. In that moment, Thomas made a silent promise to the dog, who had already lost one family. Max wouldn't lose another. The Phoenix summer intensified into what meteorologists were calling a heat dome by the 7th day of the puppy saga. Temperatures soared to 118 degrees, breaking records across Maricopa County. Emergency cooling centers opened citywide as power companies issued warnings about potential rolling blackouts due to overwhelming air conditioning demand. In Pine Valley Estates, residents were advised to limit outdoor activities and check on vulnerable neighbors. For the Sullivan family, the crisis compounded their already exhausting puppy care schedule. Thomas installed backup battery systems for the garage's climate control, unwilling to risk even a moment's power loss for the fragile puppies. Sarah stockpiled ice and extra water. Emma researched emergency cooling methods for newborn animals, creating a detailed contingency plan that impressed even Eleanor. "Smart girl," the elderly woman remarked, reviewing Emma's handwritten protocols. "Your daughter has a future in veterinary medicine, if we survive the next few weeks," Sarah replied with a tired smile. She'd been working night shifts at the hospital and taking day rotations with the puppies, surviving on scattered hours of sleep. The puppies, now a week old, were showing promising progress. Their eyes remained sealed, but their bodies had plumped with proper nutrition, and their cries had strengthened into demanding squeals during feeding times. Max continued his surrogate parenting with unwavering dedication, seemingly impervious to exhaustion. On the 8th day, as the heat wave peaked, Detective Wilson returned to the Sullivan home, accompanied by Officer Martinez and a representative from County Animal Control. Their expressions were grave as Thomas invited them into the air-conditioned living room. "Mr. Sullivan," Detective Wilson began, "I want to update you on our investigation into the Whitaker situation. What I'm about to share is confidential, but as the current custodians of the animals involved, you have a right to know." Thomas nodded, calling Sarah and Emma from the garage to join them. "We've obtained a warrant for Robert Whitaker's electronic communications," Wilson continued once everyone was seated. "What we found confirms our suspicions. Whitaker was in negotiations to sell the German Shepherd puppies to Michael Ferraro, a known organizer of dog-fighting rings in the Southwest." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Dog-fighting? Those sweet puppies." Wilson nodded grimly. "German Shepherds aren't typically bred for fighting, but their intelligence and trainability make them valuable as bait dogs used to train fighting breeds. Additionally, Ferraro's operation has been diversifying into guard dogs for illegal operations drug houses. Primarily," Emma's face had gone pale. "They were going to use them as bait. That's evil." "It gets worse," Martinez added. "The communications indicate Whitaker owes Ferraro a significant gambling debt. The puppies were payment, that's why he was so desperate to get them back." The revelation settled heavily over the room. Max,
who had followed the family inside, stood alert by Emma's side, his ears pricked forward as if understanding the gravity of the conversation. "What happens now?" Thomas asked finally. "Whitaker has been taken into custody on charges of conspiracy to commit animal cruelty and illegal gambling," Wilson explained. "His wife, Jennifer, claims no knowledge of the arrangement, though our investigation continues into her level of involvement. As for the puppies and Luna—" A sharp knock interrupted him. Eleanor Richardson stood at the open doorway, her thin frame vibrating with urgency. "The Whitaker house is on fire," she announced without preamble. Everyone rushed outside to see thick black smoke billowing from the Whitaker residence. 2 fire trucks were already on scene, firefighters unspooling hoses as neighbors gathered at a safe distance. "Jennifer was home alone," Dorothy Miller cried. "Spotting the Sullivans, they took Bob away in handcuffs this morning." Before anyone could respond, Max let out a sharp bark and bolted toward the fence line, disappearing through the now familiar loose board. "Max!" Emma screamed, starting after him. Thomas caught her arm. "Stay here. The firefighters will handle it." "But Luna's still in their backyard," Emma protested, tears streaming down her face. "She can't escape." The realization struck them all simultaneously. In the chaos of the investigation and puppy care, they'd lost track of Luna's status. She had been released from emergency care to home recovery yesterday, deemed stable enough to leave the hospital but still too weak to be separated from her remaining puppy. "The shed," Sarah gasped. "Jennifer said they were keeping Luna in the air-conditioned storage shed while she recovered." Martinez was already on his radio, alerting the fire crew to the animals potentially trapped in the backyard, but the firefighters were fully engaged with the house itself, where flames now visibly licked at the windows. "The power's been fluctuating all day," Eleanor said grimly. "If they left Luna in that shed with just a portable AC unit—" She didn't need to finish the thought. In this heat, with rolling blackouts, the shed would become a lethal oven within minutes of losing power. Max reappeared at the fence line, barking frantically toward the Sullivans before disappearing again toward the Whitakers' backyard. "He's trying to tell us something," Emma insisted. "Dad, we have to help." Thomas exchanged a look with Officer Martinez, who gave a curt nod and unclipped his utility belt. "Stay behind me," Martinez ordered, moving toward the fence with Thomas close behind. They found Max scratching desperately at the shed door, which was secured with a padlock. Through the small window, they could see Luna lying motionless on her side, the tiny puppy beside her equally still. The shed's interior was visibly sweltering, condensation fogging the window from the extreme heat trapped inside. "Stand back," Martinez ordered, drawing his service weapon. With practiced precision, he shot the padlock, the sound partially masked by the chaos of firefighting at the front of the house. The moment the door swung open, a blast of superheated air escaped. Luna didn't move, not even when Max rushed to her side, nudging her with his nose. "She's still breathing," Thomas announced, dropping to his knees beside the mother dog. "But barely." He gathered the limp puppy, which offered no resistance. "This little one's in bad shape, too. We need to cool them down immediately," Martinez said, already pulling off his uniform shirt to soak it in the nearby bird bath. Together, they worked rapidly to wrap Luna in the wet fabric while Thomas cradled the puppy against his less heated skin. Max paced anxiously between them, whining with distress. "We need to get them out of here," Thomas urged, eyeing the spreading fire. "The fence is our best exit. The front's blocked by emergency vehicles." Martinez nodded, carefully lifting Luna's dead weight. "You go first with the pup. I'll hand Luna over to you." The transfer over the fence was awkward but successful, with Max somehow understanding the process, waiting until Luna was safely across before squeezing through his access point. By the time they reached the Sullivans' driveway, Sarah had already prepared their garage as a cooling station, with fans positioned strategically and cool, wet towels ready. "Their core temperatures are dangerously high," she assessed, her nurse's training evident in her efficient movements. "Emma, bring the digital thermometer and cooling packs from my emergency kit." For the next hour, the Sullivans worked alongside Martinez to gradually lower Luna and her puppy's temperatures, using techniques Sarah had learned treating human heat stroke victims. Max never left Luna's side, his body pressed against hers as if lending her his strength, occasionally licking her face with apparent encouragement. "Come on, girl," Emma whispered, her young face streaked with tears and sweat. "Don't give up. Your babies need you." As if responding to the plea, Luna's eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing hazily on Max before closing again. "That's a good sign," Sarah encouraged. "Her body's fighting." Outside, the emergency response to the Whitaker house continued. Thomas occasionally stepped out for updates, returning with grim reports. "The fire marshal thinks it started in the kitchen," he informed them after one such reconnaissance. "Jennifer claimed she left something on the stove when she got a phone call." "Convenient timing," Eleanor remarked dryly from her perch on a garage stool. She'd appointed herself auxiliary nurse, preparing cool towels and monitoring the other puppies, who remained blissfully unaware of the drama surrounding their mother. By late afternoon, the immediate crisis had passed. The fire at the Whitaker house was contained, though the structure had suffered significant damage. Luna's temperature had stabilized in the normal range, and she had accepted small amounts of water, though she remained too weak to nurse her returned puppy. Dr. Patel arrived, summoned by Sarah's urgent call, and conducted a thorough examination of both Luna and the rescued puppy. "They've both sustained thermal injuries," she concluded soberly. "Luna's paw pads are burned from the hot floor of the shed, and the puppy shows signs of respiratory distress from the superheated air." She looked up at the anxious faces surrounding her. "They need intensive care, but I'm cautiously optimistic. If you hadn't reached them when you did—" The unfinished sentence hung in the air. Everyone's eyes turned to Max, who maintained his protective position beside Luna. "He knew," Emma said simply. "He knew she was in danger." Dr. Patel nodded. His training as a search and rescue dog included detecting victims in buildings with extreme heat or structural damage. "Those instincts never leave them." She patted Max's head with respect. "He's quite extraordinary." As Dr. Patel prepared Luna and her puppy for transport to the veterinary hospital, Detective Wilson arrived, his expression a mixture of anger and satisfaction. "Jennifer Whitaker has been arrested," he announced without preamble. "And not for the fire." "What happened?" Thomas asked, stepping outside to speak with him privately. When fire investigators entered the house, they discovered a hidden room behind the pantry. Inside were dozens of betting slips, nearly $50,000 in cash, and records of dog-fighting operations dating back 3 years. Wilson shook his head in disgust. "Turns out Jennifer wasn't just aware of Bob's activities. She was the bookkeeper for Ferraro's entire operation in the valley." "My God," Thomas breathed. So the fire. Likely an attempt to destroy evidence, Wilson confirmed. She didn't count on the safe being fireproof or us already having digital records from her husband's phone. Thomas glanced back at the garage, where his family continued tending to the rescued dogs. What happens to Luna and the puppies now? Legally, they're considered evidence in an animal cruelty case, Wilson explained. But given the circumstances and your family's obvious dedication, Animal Control is prepared to grant you emergency fostering status for all of them, pending the court case. After that, assuming convictions, you'd have first option to adopt. The possibility sent a wave of conflicting emotions through Thomas. The round-the-clock care of 6 dogs was exhausting and expensive. Their house wasn't really big enough. Their lives had been completely upended. Yet watching Emma's gentle ministrations, seeing Sarah's determined care despite her exhaustion, and witnessing Max's extraordinary devotion. Could he really imagine surrendering these animals to anyone else, as if sensing his thoughts? Max appeared in the garage doorway, his intelligent eyes fixed on Thomas with an expression that seemed to ask a question. "We're not going anywhere, boy," Thomas assured him, reaching down to scratch behind the German shepherd's ears. "They're safe now. You did it." Max's tail gave a single, affirmative wag before he returned to his post beside Luna, resuming his vigilant guard as the mother dog was prepared for transport. The loyal protector still unwilling to leave his charges even for a moment. Outside, the setting sun cast a golden glow over Pine Valley Estates, the day's record heat finally beginning to relent. Fire trucks departed one by one, neighbors gradually returned to their homes, and the ordinary rhythm of suburban life slowly resumed, though, for the Sullivan family. Nothing would ever be quite ordinary again. Luna's condition deteriorated rapidly during transport to the veterinary hospital. The emergency vehicle had barely cleared Pine Valley Estates when the German Shepherd began experiencing seizures, her already weakened body rebelling against the compounded traumas of neglect, dehydration, and heat exposure. Dr. Patel worked frantically in the back of the speeding vehicle, administering emergency medications while barking updates to the veterinary team awaiting their arrival. At the Sullivan home, the family remained unaware of this development, focused instead on maintaining the rigorous care schedule for the 5 remaining puppies. They had just completed the evening feeding when Emma's phone chimed with a message from Dr. Patel. The teenager's face crumpled as she read the text. "Luna's in critical condition," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They don't know if she'll make it through the night." The news fell like a physical blow. Sarah sank onto a garage stool. Thomas braced himself against the workbench, and Max, ever attuned to human emotions, raised his head from the puppy nest, his amber eyes tracking from face to face with evident concern. "We should be there," Emma insisted, already reaching for her jacket. "Luna needs us. She needs Max." Thomas exchanged a glance with Sarah, seeing his own exhaustion mirrored in her eyes. They hadn't had a full night's sleep in over a week. The puppies required constant attention. The house was in disarray. And yet, "She's right," he said finally. "Luna deserves to have someone with her who cares." The logistics proved challenging. The puppies couldn't be left alone. Yet the entire family felt compelled to support Luna in what might be her final hours. It was Eleanor who provided the solution, arriving at their door as if summoned by some sixth sense. a small overnight bag in hand. "You folks go," she instructed. Already settling into the armchair, they'd moved to the garage for puppy duty. "I've bottle-fed more creatures than I can count. These little ones and I will manage just fine until morning." Max presented the greatest dilemma. His dedication to the puppies had been absolute, yet his connection to Luna was undeniable. As the family prepared to leave, the German shepherd paced anxiously between the puppy nest and the door, whining softly in evident distress. "He understands she's in trouble," Emma said, kneeling beside Max. "He wants to help her, but he doesn't want to abandon the puppies." "The eternal dilemma of the protector," Eleanor observed. "Divided loyalties." After careful consideration, they decided Max should accompany them. Eleanor would call immediately if the puppies showed any signs of distress, and the veterinary hospital was only 20 minutes away. Max seemed to comprehend the decision, giving each puppy a gentle inspection before allowing Emma to clip on his leash. The veterinary emergency hospital blazed with light against the desert night, its parking lot surprisingly full despite the late hour. Inside, the reception area overflowed with worried pet owners and their animals, many suffering from heat-related conditions after the day's record temperatures. Dr. Patel met them at the triage desk, her scrubs spattered with what they realized with a shock was Luna's blood. Her expression was grave as she led them to a quiet consultation room. "Luna's condition is extremely serious," she explained without preamble. "The heat exposure triggered a cascade of organ failures. Her kidneys are shutting down, and she's developed DIC, a condition where the blood can't clot properly." "But you can treat that, right?" Emma asked, her young face pinched with worry. "Doctor," Patel hesitated, "we're trying everything. Fluid therapy, plasma transfusions, cooling protocols. But I need to be honest with you. Luna was already compromised from chronic neglect and the stress of giving birth. The heat exposure may have been too much for her system to overcome." "What about the puppy?" Sarah asked. "The one that was with her." "Slightly better prognosis," Dr. Patel replied. "Puppies are remarkably resilient, and this one is receiving intensive supportive care. I'm cautiously optimistic." "Can we see her?" Thomas asked. "Luna, briefly?" Dr. Patel conceded. "She's heavily sedated to control the seizures, but some studies suggest animals can still sense the presence of those they trust." Max, who had been sitting alertly at Emma's feet, rose immediately at these words. The movement caught Dr. Patel's attention. "I can't allow a dog in the ICU," she began apologetically. "He's not just any dog." Thomas reminded her. "He's a trained search and rescue K9, and he's the reason Luna and all her puppies are alive." Dr. Patel considered this, then nodded slowly. 5 minutes, and he'll need to be sanitized." Minutes later, properly scrubbed and wearing protective booties, Max padded silently into the intensive care unit beside the Sullivan family. Luna lay on a treatment table surrounded by monitors and IV poles, her once beautiful coat shaved in patches to accommodate various medical interventions. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped steadily, monitoring her faltering life signs. Emma choked back a sob at the sight. Even Thomas, who had thought himself prepared, felt his chest tighten with emotion. Luna looked so small and vulnerable, Nothing like the proud German shepherd from Jennifer Whittaker's carefully staged photographs. Max approached the table slowly, his nose twitching as he processed the medical smells. When he reached Luna's side, he delicately sniffed her face, then gently, so gently, placed his muzzle against her neck, resting it there in a gesture so tender it brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, Luna's tail moved the faintest whisper of a wag. "She knows he's here," Emma whispered, hope flaring in her voice. Dr. Patel, watching from the doorway, checked the monitors with professional interest. "Her heart rate has stabilized somewhat," she noted. "Blood pressure's coming up slightly, too." Max remained motionless, his muzzle still pressed against Luna's neck, his eyes half closed as if concentrating deeply. The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment and the soft whir of oxygen support. "I've read about therapy dogs helping patients," Sarah said quietly. "But this seems different." "It is," Dr. Patel agreed. "This isn't trained behavior. This is something much more fundamental." She checked her watch reluctantly. "I'm sorry, but we need to continue treatment. You can wait in the family room, and I'll update you hourly." They tried to coax Max away, but the German shepherd planted his feet, refusing to budge from Luna's side. When a technician attempted to physically remove him, Max emitted a low, rumbling growl, the first aggressive sound they'd ever heard from him. "Let him stay," Dr. Patel said suddenly. "Just for tonight. I'll take responsibility." Her decision violated hospital protocols, but something in Max's demeanor, his absolute conviction and steady presence, swayed her professional judgment. The Sullivan family retreated to the waiting area, leaving Max standing sentinel beside the critically ill mother dog. Throughout that long night, the Sullivan family dozed fitfully in uncomfortable waiting room chairs, awakening whenever Dr. Patel appeared with updates. By dawn, exhaustion had left them hollow-eyed and disoriented, but they refused to leave while Luna's life hung in the balance. At 6:17 a.m., as the first light of morning painted the eastern sky, Dr. Patel emerged from the treatment area with a different expression, cautious relief replacing grim determination. "Her values are stabilizing," she reported. "The DIC seems to be resolving, and her kidney function is showing improvement. I can't explain it medically, but Luna seems to be pulling through the crisis." "And Max?" Emma asked immediately. Dr. Patel smiled faintly. "Hasn't moved from her side all night. One of my technicians said she came in to adjust an IV and found him actually licking Luna's face, almost like he was grooming her. Shortly after that, Luna's fever broke." Thomas rubbed his stubbled face, emotion making his voice rough. "Can we see them?" The scene that greeted them in the ICU defied medical explanation. Luna's eyes were open, alert for the first time since her collapse. More remarkably, she had managed to shift her position slightly, creating a space beside her where Max now lay, his body pressed supportively against hers, his head resting protectively over her front paws. The machines continued to beep, but their rhythm seemed stronger, more assured. "I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 15 years, Dr. Patel said quietly, "and I've never seen anything quite like this." Your Max may have accomplished what all our medical interventions couldn't. Emma approached the table cautiously, tears streaming freely down her face. You did it, Max, she whispered. You saved her again. Max lifted his head just enough to acknowledge Emma with a glance, then returned to his self-appointed duty, his body language conveying absolute dedication to the injured mother dog beside him. Outside the treatment room, Dr. Patel delivered her professional assessment. Luna's not out of danger yet. The damage to her kidneys may be permanent, and she'll need specialized care for weeks, possibly months. But if she continues improving at this rate, she might be stable enough to transfer to our step-down unit tomorrow. And then, Thomas asked. Dr. Patel's expression turned serious. Then, we face hard decisions about her long-term care. Luna will likely need ongoing medical support, special diet, possibly medication for the rest of her life. She may never be the robust, healthy dog she once was. The implication was clear. Luna would require extraordinary commitment from whoever adopted her time, resources, and dedication beyond what most pet owners could provide. Before Thomas could respond, Sarah placed her hand on his arm. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, she said firmly. For now, let's just be grateful she's alive. As they prepared to leave Sarah to check on the puppies, Thomas to shower before work, Emma lingered in the doorway of the treatment room, watching Max maintain his vigilant post beside Luna. He won't leave her, she said, equal parts statement and question. Doctor? Patel shook her head. Honestly, I'm not sure we could make him leave if we tried. And at this point, I'm inclined to consider him part of her treatment plan. She paused, then added quietly, sometimes medicine needs to recognize when to step aside and let something more fundamental take over. As they departed, Luna lifted her head slightly, her eyes meeting Emma's across the room. In that gaze, despite all the medical equipment and clinical surroundings, passed a silent communication of trust from one mother to the humans who had saved her children when she could not. 3 days after Luna's near-death experience, Detective Wilson requested a meeting with the Sullivan family. They gathered around their kitchen table, the formal setting a stark contrast to the chaos that had become their new normal. Emma joined them directly from the garage, her shirt spotted with puppy formula, while Sarah had rushed home from her hospital shift, still wearing scrubs. Thomas had canceled his summer curriculum planning session, prioritizing this meeting that might determine the future of the dogs that had so thoroughly disrupted and enriched their lives. I'll get straight to the point, Detective Wilson began, spreading several documents across the table. The case against Robert and Jennifer Whitaker has expanded significantly. What began as an animal neglect investigation has uncovered a multi-state illegal gambling and dogfighting operation. The evidence recovered from their residence, particularly the financial records Jennifer attempted to destroy in the fire, has led to 12 arrests across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. He paused, allowing this information to sink in. Both Whitakers are facing multiple felony charges. Given the severity of these charges and the substantial evidence, their attorney is exploring plea options. One stipulation the prosecutor has already established is that they will forfeit all rights to the animals involved. Emma's face lit up with cautious hope. Does that mean Luna and the puppies are free? Not exactly, Wilson replied carefully. They're still considered evidence in an ongoing investigation, but County Animal Services has petitioned for permanent surrender. Once granted, which appears likely within the next 2 weeks, they'll need permanent placement. Thomas exchanged glances with Sarah, a silent communication passing between them. They had discussed this possibility extensively over the past sleepless nights, weighing the practical challenges against the emotional attachments already formed. The puppies will find homes easily, Wilson continued. Purebred German Shepherd puppies, especially with this compelling backstory. There's already a waiting list of qualified adopters, including several of my colleagues in law enforcement. And Luna? Sarah asked, though they all suspected the answer. Wilson's expression softened. That's more complicated. Dr. Patel's latest assessment indicates Luna will require ongoing medical care. Her kidney function remains compromised, and there's evidence of neurological damage from the heat exposure and seizures. The prognosis for full recovery is limited, meaning no one will want her, Emma stated flatly, anger flashing in her tired eyes. Most potential adopters seek healthy pets, Wilson acknowledged. Luna would be classified as a special needs adoption, requiring significant financial and time commitment. Before anyone could respond, the side door opened, admitting Eleanor Richardson. Though not invited to the meeting, she entered with the confidence of someone whose age had liberated them from social niceties. "Pardon the interruption," she said, not sounding particularly apologetic. "Max was getting anxious in the garage. Thought he might do better in here." The German Shepherd padded in behind her, his nails clicking on the tile floor. He made a circuit of the room, sniffing each person in greeting before settling vigilantly at Emma's feet. His appearance had changed subtly over the past week. The perpetual alertness of a working dog had softened into something more domestic, though no less dignified. "How's our mother dog doing today?" Wilson asked, momentarily diverted. "Holding her own," Eleanor reported. "She's managed to nurse the returned puppy for short periods this morning, first time since the fire. Small victory, but we'll take it." Luna had returned home from the veterinary hospital yesterday. Her condition upgraded to stable, but guarded. The reunion with her puppies had been carefully orchestrated under Dr. Patel's supervision, with Luna still too weak for extended contact but clearly comforted by their presence. "That's actually related to what I came to discuss," Wilson said, returning to the documents before him. "County Animal Services is considering your family for permanent adoption of Luna, given your demonstrated commitment to her care. The puppies would be placed separately once they're weaned. Except for the one that was with Luna during the fire, there's medical consensus that separating them might compromise both their recoveries." He slid a formal-looking application across the table. "This would be expedited due to the circumstances, but still requires a home evaluation, financial verification, and commitment to Luna's ongoing medical needs." Thomas picked up the document, scanning its contents. The estimated monthly costs for Luna's care were sobering, as was the projected timeline for rehabilitation. "We need to discuss this as a family," he began diplomatically. "What's to discuss?" Emma interrupted. "We can't abandon her now. Max wouldn't let us anyway." As if confirming this assessment, Max lifted his head at the sound of his name, his intelligent eyes moving between the humans. "Emma, honey," Sarah said gently. "This isn't a simple decision. Luna may need specialized care for years. There are financial considerations, space limitations, and she might die anyway." Thomas added softly. Dr. Patel was clear that even with the best care, Luna's long-term prognosis is uncertain. Emma's face flushed with emotion. So we just give up on her. After everything Max didn't give up when it was hard, he risked his life to save those puppies. He stayed by Luna's side all night when the doctor said she wouldn't make it. Her voice cracked. How can we do any less? The passionate declaration hung in the air, its moral weight undeniable despite its adolescent delivery. Eleanor, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Perhaps there's a middle path here. All eyes turned to the elderly woman, who had become an unexpected yet essential part of their extended family during the crisis. I've been meaning to speak with you about this, she continued, addressing Thomas and Sarah. My daughter in Tucson has been after me for years to move closer to her. The heat's getting harder on these old bones, and rattling around that big house alone doesn't make much sense anymore. Thomas frowned, not following the connection. You're moving, Eleanor? Considering it, she clarified. But I wouldn't sell the house. Julie has her own place. And to be frank, we'd drive each other crazy with too much togetherness. Her eyes twinkled momentarily. What I'm proposing is this. I rent my house to you folks at a reasonable rate. It's nearly twice the size of this one, with that fenced acre in back. Plenty of room for a family and a few four-legged additions. The suggestion landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of possibility outward. We couldn't possibly, Sarah began. Don't be ridiculous. Eleanor cut her off. It's a practical solution. You need space. I need reliable tenants who won't destroy the place. The rental income would supplement my retirement nicely, and I'd retain ownership for eventual estate purposes. Wilson, watching this exchange with interest, added, That would certainly address the space concerns noted in the preliminary home evaluation. Thomas and Sarah exchanged another look, this one longer and more complex. They had been happy in their modest home, but the past 2 weeks had highlighted its limitations. Eleanor's house, with its sprawling ranch layout and extensive grounds, would indeed solve multiple problems. We'd need to run the numbers, Thomas said cautiously. Of course, Eleanor agreed. I'm not suggesting charity, just a mutually beneficial arrangement between neighbors. And, she added with a slight smile, I'd still be close enough to visit my granddogs regularly. Emma, who had been following this exchange with growing excitement, turned to Detective Wilson. Does this mean we could keep all the puppies too? That's not what Thomas began. One step at a time, young lady, Wilson advised with a chuckle. Let's focus on Luna and her special needs puppy first. The others have multiple qualified adopters already interested. The conversation shifted to logistics, paperwork requirements, timelines, financial considerations, but Thomas found his attention drawn to Max, who had risen and moved to the window overlooking the Whitaker property. The German shepherd stood silently watching, his posture alert but not tense. Following Max's gaze, Thomas realized that a for sale sign now stood in the Whitakers' front yard, the house behind it still showing scars from the fire. The sight prompted a sudden recollection. "Detective," he said, interrupting a technical explanation of the adoption process. "You never told us who Michael Ferraro is. When you first came to arrest Bob Whitaker, you mentioned that name." Wilson's expression darkened. "Ferraro is the kingpin of the largest dog-fighting ring we've uncovered in the Southwest. He's been on our radar for years, but he's careful uses intermediaries, burner phones, cash transactions. The evidence from the Whitakers may finally give us enough to bring federal charges." "And the puppies were going to him?" Sarah asked, her nurse's compassion hardening into something fiercer. Wilson nodded grimly. "According to the text messages we recovered, Whitaker owed Ferraro nearly $50,000 in gambling debts. The arrangement was to settle a portion of that debt with the puppies, $5,000 each, delivered at 8 weeks old." "To become bait dogs," Emma whispered, the horror of this fate fully registering. "They would have been tortured, which makes Max's intervention all the more remarkable," Wilson observed, almost as if he understood exactly what was at stake. All eyes turned to the German shepherd, who had returned to Emma's side, his steady presence a constant throughout the turmoil of recent days. "He did understand," Eleanor said quietly. "Better than any of us." The certainty in her voice silenced the room. Eleanor rarely spoke about her military career, but when she did, her expertise was unquestionable. "Dogs like Max are trained to recognize suffering and respond," she continued. "Officer Cooper would have spent thousands of hours reinforcing that core mission: locate, protect, rescue. Those imperatives don't disappear with a change in circumstance. They become part of the animal's fundamental nature." She rose with the slight stiffness of age and approached Max, kneeling carefully before him despite her arthritic knees. Taking his scarred face between her weathered hands, she looked directly into his amber eyes. "You recognized what was happening next door, didn't you, boy? You saw puppies in distress and a mother who couldn't protect them. And you did what you were trained to do, what James Cooper taught you was right." At the mention of his former handler's name, Max's ears pricked forward, a small whine escaping his throat. "He would be so proud of you," Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "So very proud." The simple eulogy for Officer Cooper and recognition of his legacy living on through Max's actions affected everyone in the room. Emma wiped tears from her cheeks. Sarah reached for Thomas's hand under the table. Even Detective Wilson cleared his throat several times before speaking again. "Well," he said finally, gathering his documents, "I think we've covered everything for today. The application process is straightforward from here. Given the circumstances and the clear bond already formed, I anticipate approval within 2 weeks, pending the home assessment." As Wilson prepared to leave, he paused at the door, looking back at the tableau of humans and dog united by extraordinary circumstances. "One more thing," he added. "The department's K-9 unit heard about Max's actions. They've extended an invitation for him to receive a commendation at their annual ceremony next month. Posthumous recognition for Officer Cooper will be included, with his family in attendance." This final piece of news settled over the room like a benediction, an official acknowledgement of Max's heroism and a connection to the handler he had lost. After Wilson departed, the family remained at the kitchen table, the weight of decisions still before them. The practical challenges were significant financial strain, space limitations, the ongoing demands of Luna's medical needs. Yet balanced against these concerns stood the powerful moral imperative Emma had articulated and the living example of courage and commitment that Max provided daily. "I suppose we should look at Eleanor's rental proposal seriously," Thomas said finally, breaking the silence. "And the adoption application," Sarah added, touching the paperwork Wilson had left. "Does this mean—" Emma began. Hope illuminating her exhausted face. Thomas exchanged one more glance with Sarah, seeing in her eyes the same certainty he felt growing in his own heart. Some decisions transcended practical considerations. Some bonds, once formed, could not be broken without diminishing everyone involved. "It means," he said carefully, "that we have a lot of work ahead of us. But yes, Emma, Luna, and at least one of her puppies have found their forever home." Max, who had been listening with characteristic attention, rose and padded to Thomas's side. With deliberate gentleness, he rested his muzzle on Thomas's knee, a gesture of both gratitude and sealing of a pact between species. Outside, the summer sun beat down on Pine Valley Estates, the heat wave continuing unabated, but inside the Sullivan home, a different kind of warmth had taken hold, the unbreakable bonds of a family expanded by crisis and cemented by compassion. 1 year later, Eleanor Richardson sat in the shade of her sprawling mesquite tree, watching the scene unfolding across her former backyard with quiet satisfaction. The Sullivan family had transformed the space into what Emma jokingly called the Shepherd's Haven, a carefully designed environment that accommodated both human and canine needs. The irrigation system Thomas had installed kept patches of buffalo grass green despite the Arizona heat, creating cool islands amid the desert-appropriate landscaping. A series of ramps and modified stairs allowed Luna easy access to the covered porch and shallow wading pool that helped regulate her body temperature during the hot months. "Not bad for a year's work," Eleanor remarked to Sarah, who brought a tray of lemonade to the shaded patio table. "When I rented you folks this place, I never imagined dog paradise." Sarah laughed, settling into the adjacent chair. "Sometimes I can't believe it myself. If you'd told me last summer that we'd be living in a bigger house with multiple dogs, I'd have said you were delusional." "Life has a way of rearranging our plans," Eleanor observed, accepting a glass of lemonade with a nod of thanks. "Especially when someone like Max gets involved." As if hearing his name, the German shepherd looked up from his position near the wading pool, where Luna was enjoying the cool water. Though now 7 years old with more silver threading through his muzzle, Max remained the vigilant guardian of his expanded family. His amber eyes surveyed the yard, accounting for each member of his pack before returning to his relaxed but attentive posture. Luna had defied medical expectations over the past year. While she would never fully recover from the damage to her kidneys and nervous system, careful management had given her a quality of life that seemed impossible during those critical days after the fire. She moved with a slight limp, tired more easily than a healthy dog her age, and required a special diet and daily medication. But her eyes were bright, her coat had regained its luster, and she had developed a gentle dignity that commanded respect from humans and canines alike. Beside Luna, splashing with less restraint in the shallow water, was the puppy who had shared her ordeal in the superheated shed, now a gangly adolescent. Phoenix had grown into his oversized paws and ears, though he retained the playful exuberance that had charmed the Sullivan family into keeping him alongside his mother. His development had been delayed by the trauma of his early days, but what he lacked in size he made up for in personality. "Have you heard from any of the other adoptive families?" Eleanor asked, watching Phoenix attempt to engage his more sedate mother in play. Sarah nodded. "We just got an update from the Williamson family yesterday. Their puppy they kept the name Emma gave her. Willow just passed her therapy dog certification. They're taking her to the Children's Hospital next week for her first official visit." "Not surprising," Eleanor commented. "Good bloodlines, despite the Whitakers' neglect."
And with Max's influence during those critical early weeks? She trailed off, watching Thomas emerge from the house with a large platter of grilled vegetables and chicken. The adoption of the remaining puppies had proceeded smoothly once they were weaned. The Sullivan family had been selective about the adoptive homes, insisting on meeting each potential family multiple times. Emma had created detailed profiles of each puppy's personality and needs, displaying a level of observational skill that impressed even Eleanor with her decades of canine behavioral experience. Through a combination of Emma's advocacy and Detective Wilson's connections, all 4 puppies had been placed with families who understood their background and were committed to their well-being. "Food's ready," Thomas called, setting the platter on the large outdoor table they'd added for family gatherings. "Emma, can you bring out the salad and rolls?" Their daughter appeared from the side yard, now 15 and growing into a confident young woman. The experience with Luna and her puppies had crystallized Emma's passion for animal welfare into a clear career path. She had begun volunteering more formally at Desert Paws Rescue and was already researching college programs in veterinary medicine. "Got them right here, Dad," she replied, balancing a large wooden salad bowl and breadbasket. "Mrs. Jefferson sent over some of her homemade rolls when I walked past her house." The mention of neighbors sending food was no longer unusual. The Sullivan family's adoption of Luna and Phoenix, along with their rental of Eleanor's property, had catalyzed an unexpected community transformation. What began as curiosity about those people who took in the rescued dogs had evolved into something more significant, a neighborhood that now looked out for each other's welfare with the same attention Max had shown toward the neglected puppies. Dorothy Miller, once the unwitting instigator of the confrontation over Max's theft, had become one of Luna's most devoted admirers, regularly bringing homemade dog treats she researched to comply with Luna's dietary restrictions. Mike Jefferson, the retired paramedic, had volunteered his services during Luna's early recovery, helping Sarah monitor vital signs and administer medications. Even Beverly Wilson, whose gossipy nature had initially amplified suspicions about Max, now coordinated the neighborhood pet alert system that had already reunited 3 lost animals with their owners. "Quite a change from last year," Eleanor observed, accepting a plate from Thomas. "Remember how this all started? Half the neighborhood ready to call animal control on poor Max?" Thomas shook his head, the memory still capable of raising his protective instincts. "People are quick to judge what they don't understand, and slow to acknowledge when they're wrong." Sarah added, "Though I'll give our neighbors credit once they saw the truth. Most of them stepped up admirably." The conversation paused as everyone filled their plates, the simple meal elevated by the perfect weather and good company. Max and Phoenix joined them at the perimeter of the dining area, settling onto the special cooling mats Thomas had installed in the shade. Luna remained in her wading pool, content to observe from a distance. "Any news about the Whitaker case?" Eleanor asked after a few minutes of appreciative eating. Thomas nodded, swallowing before answering. "Wilson called yesterday. Robert Whitaker accepted a plea deal, 8 years with possibility of parole after 5, plus forfeiture of assets connected to the gambling operation. Jennifer got less 4 years in exchange for testimony against Ferraro and his network." "What about Ferraro himself?" Emma asked, her expression hardening at the name of the man who would have condemned the puppies to such a terrible fate. "Trial starts next month," Thomas replied. "Wilson says the evidence is substantial, especially with Jennifer's cooperation. They're expecting multiple federal convictions."
A somber silence fell over the table as they contemplated the darker elements that had precipitated their current happiness. The knowledge that dog-fighting operations continued despite law enforcement efforts cast a shadow over their personal victory. Emma broke the silence, her voice carrying the idealism of youth tempered by recent experience. "We can't save them all, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to save the ones we can." Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. "When did you get so wise?" "She's been hanging around Eleanor too much," Thomas joked, lightening the mood. Eleanor accepted the compliment with a dignified inclination of her head. "There are worse influences, though I suspect Max deserves more credit for this family's philosophical development than I do." As if acknowledging his role, Max rose and made a slow circuit of the table, checking each human in turn before returning to his position beside Phoenix. The younger dog immediately rolled onto his back in a display of submission that made everyone smile. "Has it really only been a year?" Sarah mused, watching the dogs interact. "Sometimes it feels like they've always been part of our family." "And sometimes," Thomas added, "it feels like yesterday that we were all standing in the garage, trying to figure out how to feed 5 puppies every 2 hours, worth every sleepless night," Emma declared, with the certainty of someone whose advocacy had been vindicated. As the meal concluded and cleanup began, Eleanor remained in her seat, taking advantage of her guest status and octogenarian privileges. From this vantage point, she observed the family's easy coordination, Thomas and Emma clearing plates, Sarah storing leftovers, all moving with the synchronicity of people who had found their rhythm together. Max supervised this domestic ballet with evident approval before turning his attention to Luna, who had finally emerged from her pool. The mother dog shook herself carefully, her movements deliberate where once they might have been fluid, and made her way to the porch steps. Max immediately positioned himself beside her, his body offering subtle support as she navigated the single step. The sight brought unexpected moisture to Eleanor's eyes. In her long career working with military and police dogs, she had witnessed countless examples of canine courage, intelligence, and loyalty. But there was something special about Max, a depth of understanding that transcended training, an empathy that seemed to comprehend suffering across the boundaries of species. "You were right, James," she whispered, addressing the memory of Officer Cooper. "He was the best of them all." As twilight descended over Pine Valley Estates, the first stars appearing in the deepening blue sky, the expanded Sullivan family gathered on the porch. Luna settled on her orthopedic bed. Phoenix curled against her side in an echo of his earliest days. Emma sat cross-legged on the deck beside them, her homework spread around her but momentarily forgotten as she scratched behind Max's ears. Thomas and Sarah occupied the porch swing, their free hands clasped between them. Max, ever vigilant, surveyed his domain from his position at Emma's side. His mission had evolved but not ended from rescuer to guardian, from hero to family member. In the quiet contentment of the gathered beings, human and canine alike, there existed a harmony that required no words to express. Some distance away, the rebuilt Whitaker house stood vacant, its for sale sign a reminder of how quickly fortunes could change. But here, in this space transformed by compassion and commitment, a different legacy had taken root, one measured not in property values or social media followers, but in lives saved and connections forged. "Pretty good life we've made here," Thomas observed softly to no one in particular. No one disagreed. They say wisdom comes with age, but Max's story reminds us that sometimes the wisest souls walk on four legs. In our golden years, when we've seen enough of life to recognize what truly matters, this tale of an aging hero finding purpose again speaks directly to our hearts. Remember how it felt to be overlooked. Max did. Remember fighting to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Max never forgot. This remarkable shepherd, carrying the scars of his past service yet still answering the call when needed most, embodies the values our generation holds dear: loyalty, sacrifice, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when no one believes you. We've lived long enough to know that second acts in life are possible, that family